thanks again. You've actually kept us somewhat on time, and in the interest of time, I am going to go ahead and get it turned over to Mr. Einhorn, who is going to speak today. So Gary, would you come up and let's hear about the Entrepreneurial Ear. So one question, why ear, not ears?
That's a good question, Chris.
Sorry, I didn't have a joke today, so I had to really reach for it. Okay.
You need the guts of a burglar. That is something that one of my many mentors spoke to me about. And it has to do with success as an entrepreneur. There's also a quote from Frederick II of Prussia, who many years ago said, "Great things are achieved only when we take great risks." And that is what entrepreneurs do, is they take an incredible risk to be an entrepreneur. Because there is no guaranteed salary or income. Everything is dependent on one's own abilities and wits, etc. However, there is an antidote, and that antidote is to amass a team, and by that I mean having a financial advisor, an accountant or CPA, an insurance agent, an attorney. This is the team that it's important for entrepreneurs to assemble so that they feel supported, and should something come up, they have a team that they can commune with and contact. Besides that, it is absolutely vital to have mentors. I have had 7 different businesses, and fortunately they've all been successful, and most of it, if not a significant portion of it, is due to the fact that I was able to put myself in a position, and this is an important point, to know when there are mentors present, or quite frankly, how to attract mentors. For example, when I was 45 years of age, I had sold one of my businesses, and I was trying to decide, what am I going to do next? And so what I did was, I went to work in a tofu factory, believe it or not. And in the tofu factory, I was listening to classical music playing. And what this did for me was it was a temporary respite from working really hard, and gave me time to start to think about what is my next step. And what happened one day is my friend Sam, who was the owner of the tofu factory, and I was working for him just to help him out for some time, asked me to take his van and make deliveries. And I went up to upstate New York. I was living in Nyack, New York at the time. And lo and behold, I made a delivery of tofu to a person who was making tofu knishes. And the first thing he asked me was, "What are you doing? You're a married man with 2 children and you're delivering tofu?" And I explained to him that I was taking a respite and trying to figure out the next steps of my life. And he said, "Gary, you know, I need someone to distribute my tofu knishes in upstate New York, in Woodstock, in High Falls, and those areas." And I said, "I don't know anything about distribution, nothing." He said, "I'll mentor you." Lo and behold, 2.5 years later, I had sales approaching $500,000. with just myself and one other employee. That's an example of being open to the possibility that mentors, and they're available to all of us. I'll get to some of the nuts and bolts of the ABCs of entrepreneurship. Some of the things to think about is marketing. And by the way, marketing and financial diligence, etc., are not just reserved for profit businesses, but all the principles that make for a successful profit business work for nonprofits such as yourself as a service organization. For example, you need to do marketing. You'll want to do marketing to increase the number of people that might be interested in joining Kiwanis, or events that you have, whatever. It's extremely important with respect to marketing, in my opinion, that you focus on the person primarily and the business secondarily. That's not to mean that you don't pay attention to the business, but the primary reason for being in business is, in my opinion, to establish relationships. Basically, people do business with people that they like and trust. You can have 5 electricians, for example, with the same capabilities, and the one that's going to get the most business is the one who focuses primarily on establishing connection. That's what I believe. And the business will come as a result of the connections and the communion that one has with others. Exposure and presence are absolutely key words to think about in being successful, whether it's a for-profit business or a nonprofit business. And by that I mean anything one can do to gain exposure and presence. That means, for example, doing presentations, doing service work in your community. Anything that puts you out in the public so that people can make a decision as to whether or not this is someone or some organization that we want to do business with. Exposure and presence are key. Buying and selling a business, I'm going to make a few comments about that. Obviously, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to key on a few ideas here for you. When buying a business, what you want to be sure that you ask for are at least 3 years of profit and loss statements and tax returns. There may be some resistance to gaining the tax returns, but they're important to see if they're congruent, if there's any major difference between the profit and loss statement that you're receiving and the tax return. And the profit and loss statement needs to be signed by the owner and also the person who prepared the P&L statement. Because anybody can go on a computer and print off anything, anything at all. But if there's responsibility by virtue of signatures, it can make a difference in a court of law. Now, in selling a business, obviously, one is going to need to furnish financial information and other information that can possibly be used by somebody to duplicate your business, not have to buy it. So it's important to be sure that you ask for and have them sign a non-disclosure, confidentiality, non-compete agreement, which, by the way, may not be permissible in a court of law. So what I suggest is that you put a requirement on that document that a minimum of $50,000 be charged should the person that you're supplying the information to not adhere to the 3 principles that are listed in that document. It's also important as an entrepreneur to be able to present in public. That means, in many cases, Toastmasters, which is not only a speaking club, but it's a club where one can develop confidence and a sense of self and not be intimidated by a number of people that one is presenting to whose eyes are totally on you. So I'm guessing here that I have about 60 eyes on me right now. But I welcome that. But it took a long time for me to get to that position where I welcome standing up in a group of people whom I really don't know. I know a few of you. I know Josh, I know Ron, and I know Jess, and a little bit of Barb, but the rest of you, I don't have a clue. I don't know what you're thinking about me, et cetera, et cetera. But the antidote to this is Toastmasters, where you can practice developing your sense of being, your self-confidence, your ability to present to a group of people of any size. Let me see if there's anything else. Employees. When I've hired employees, I never stated a salary for a specific position. What I did was I asked the potential employee, what would you like to earn? What would make you happy with this position that I've outlined and described? And then, if it was an employee that I was interested in, I would add $5 more per hour with no questions asked to that employee. I also, by the way, as a condition of employment, I asked the employee to guarantee, unless of course there's an emergency situation that changes the picture, but to guarantee that that employee would stay for at least a year. And when the employee, or if the employee decided to leave, it would be their responsibility to recommend a replacement of the same or better quality of the employee that I hired. I really had no difficulty filling places. And yes, there was some turnover, but I was totally blessed with this protocol to never be stuck without an employee and to have the best employees and to consider employees not as a liability, but totally as an asset and really a member of the family of employees working for whatever business it was. There are two books that I would like to recommend before I turn the floor over to possible questions. And they are a book called The E-Myth, or The E-Myth Revisited. Some of you may know that book, written by Michael Gerber. It is available probably in a used bookstore or online. It is an excellent book for entrepreneurs. It describes the three positions an entrepreneur could have. One is that of an employee, one is that of a level higher than that, sort of a managerial position, and then the position of being an owner. And it's really important for entrepreneurs to understand the difference between those three positions in the E-Myth. And the other book is something that was written many, many years ago by Nathaniel Hill called Think and Grow Rich. But it really is a primer for entrepreneurship. Before I turn the floor over, I want to read something that I actually found on the wall of a men's bathroom at the Arbor House in Talent, Oregon. It was plastered up behind the toilet. Why it was put there, I don't know, but I noticed it, and I asked if I could make copies, and I give this to many of my business consulting clients. It's called The Scottish Himalayan Expedition by W.H. Murray. And what's interesting about this to me is the Scots were able to climb the Himalayas. And the highest mountain in Scotland is Ben Nevis, which is only 4,200 feet. But the answer to the answer to this question, rather, is quite simple. They must have practiced in the Swiss or French Alps. But I find it really interesting that they were able to climb the Himalayas. And I went to university in Edinburgh, so I have a particular fondness for this piece. And it goes as follows. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy. The chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man, so this was written many, many years ago, this should really be neutral, actually. But anyway, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. It's very patriarchal, but nonetheless the message is clear. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Goethe was a German philosopher and educator and so forth. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Are there any questions or comments anyone may have?
What were I mean, you mentioned tofu, or what were some of the businesses that you led?
Oh, thank you for that question, Chris. When I was 12, my first business was shoveling the sidewalks and driveways of wealthy New York City homes. And that was the first business. And the second one, at 13, because my birthday was in May, was watering the gardens, and there were no sprinkler systems at this time. I'm talking about the early, I'm a wartime baby, the early 1940s and 50s. And I would water their plants and grass and gardens. And then number 3 was I was in partnership with 2 brothers in a factory that produced knitted fabric, and I had lived in Germany and worked in several factories and went to school in England to learn all about that particular trade. So that was number 3. And number 4 was I was a professional tennis teacher. That was number 4. Number 5 was I had 5 hot pretzel and Italian ice stands in New York City. That was number 5. Let's see, number 6. Number 6 was the distribution of organic and natural foods in Nyack, New York. Number 7 was the same business recreated in Southern Oregon, and actually there were 8. And number 8 was a business consulting, which I've done for the last 17 years. Woo, that's quite a hefty schedule, and very varied. But the principles are, there's a commonality to the principles. So one can do any business, really. You just have to educate yourself in the specifics. But there's a commonality to many of the challenges and opportunities. Carl, yeah.
So how have you modified your advice in the last few years about getting employees, since everybody is looking for employees?
The answer to that is by not having employees anymore. I don't mean to be facetious, but that's why I'm doing the business consulting. I'm not looking to do anything with employees in this particular environment. It's just too difficult, and they're transient, and then there was COVID, and so the answer is by just not having them.
But all of your clients can't do the same, so how are you advising them?
Ah, that's a good question. Well, I'm advising them to use, if they're going to have employees, if they're necessary for their particular business in this environment, is to use the method of hiring that I discussed in my talk. And do your best to have employees that are recommended, that don't come through newspaper ads, but rather are recommended by someone or a number of people that you trust. Does that answer the question?
How do you, in keeping with Carl's question, how do you advise businesses when they have employees that really want to work remotely?
You mean not work from home?
Well, there's a lot about that being written, whether it's more productive to have the employees back in the office or have them at home. I would say the answer to that is whatever works. And it could be a hybrid situation. I think a lot depends specifically on who the employee is. You also have a choice to decide, I don't want any employees that that are not working in the office. Or I really want to have hybrids or not. So that's a decision you can make. But I think it really, not everybody is, it's not advisable for some people to be in a hybrid situation, or totally in the office, or totally at home. You have to really assess, I think, what the person is about. Does that answer? Jess.
Gary and I have had the opportunity to work together for on a couple of different occasions with consulting, and I think what I appreciated about my appointments with you were Gary's very focused on like the relationship. So answering specific questions like that, you know, it's depending on you. But I think what I've learned most from you is to develop those relationships through Kiwanis, through this. So that being said, my question is, who besides me is your ideal client? Like if somebody here was going to recommend, who would be an ideal client for your business consultant?
My ideal client would be somebody who is willing to do the work, because I give homework.
Yeah.
As you know, Jesse, you had some homework. I want the clients to leave with action items. And when I first started doing business consulting, I worked for the Small Business Development Center, where I couldn't reject any client and they did not have to pay for the service. And what I realized, but I did that because I wanted to see how the Small Business Development Center operated. And what I realized was, these people are not my ideal client, because oftentimes I give them action items and I put everything in a computer and I'd have the notes when they came back in 2 or 3 weeks, and it was either, oh gosh, my wife left me, or my dog ate the notes, or oh, they fell in the toilet, or whatever. It was just one excuse after another. And so my ideal client is somebody who is willing to do the work. And Jess is an ideal client. And it doesn't mean that one has to follow everything that I say, but at least try it out, investigate, see if it fits. And those are my ideal clients. And when I did the bulk of my consulting in Ashland, I didn't take every client that came through the door. I felt that it wouldn't be right for me to do that. I was trying to determine what the relationship would be like, what the chemistry would be like, how it would benefit the client. And if not, I would just say, I'm sorry. I don't think this is going to work. Yeah.
We're signing up for a one-on-one, right? Gift for you.
Oh, thank you.
Just take a picture.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Oops, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Tag you on social media.
Appreciate
All right,
it.
thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. Actually, the whole business sale, non-disclosure, $50,000 there is actually something that's very timely. So we're a little over, but did we tally the results?
Did everybody get their vote in?
Looks like.
Yeah, I would say it's probably pretty unanimous that that
So those-
the ballot as published is accepted.
We'll formalize it in a freaking newsletter. So with that, Mr. Duff.
Don't forget your hours. It's a big week. Our guests next week are Trinity Key Club.
The whole club.
They will bring a ton of kids. It's going to be a fun event. They're going to tell us about their trip to the leadership conference up in Seattle that we helped fund.
Inducting a new member, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Oh. Well, Ted Jones with US Bank. I think Brian's going to give you a little bit more information.
Okay.
And we're going to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
But I'd like to introduce it to the club. Ted. And Ted, this is your certificate,
Okay, thank you.
your pin,
Okay,
and your new member packet.
okay.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what interested you about Kiwanis?
Well, I moved here to Central Oregon 2 years ago, worked for US Bank, obviously transferred from the Seattle area. I'm from Oregon originally. But the thing that was really impressed upon me when I came over here to this market, this area, was the focus on community involvement. And, you know, we've done various things in Prineville, Redmond, and Bend and whatnot, but I got to meet Brian at one of the chamber events here in Redmond, and he had invited me to come here, and the biggest question I asked him that he answered for me was, why Kiwanis versus other groups? And he said it was a commitment back to the children, kids, basically. And for me, in my spare time, I officiate high school football and baseball in the area. So I'm involved at the high school level and junior high levels with kids I see all across the footprint from the endeavors of doing that as well, too. So yeah, I just felt like it was a great fit, and Brian was a good encourager for that and whatnot. So yeah, and I want to be more invested into this business community here too. So.
Great, and Ted, do you have your family?
What's that?
Do you have a family? Is your family?
Oh yeah, sorry. More about me personally. Okay. Been married for almost 24 years to my wife. I didn't have children myself, but I have 2 grown stepchildren. And the main reason why we moved out here to this area, my sister and brother-in-law moved to Prineville 5 years ago from Portland, and my sister has dementia, early onset dementia, and so that was a big part of us moving here, is to be part of her support network and that kind of thing.
And what kinds of things do you like to do?
Well, sports officiate,
Yeah.
of course. My wife and I are both musicians.
Oh, wow.
And I play the drums, she plays piano and sings. We used to lead worship at a church in Seattle for many years. That's how we met. That's not a long story. Want to get better at golf. I'm a horrible golfer, and I need to get back to that. We love fishing and outdoor activities, that kind of thing, too. So.
Brian, do you have anything to add?
No, Ted just came into the office after we talked at the chamber event, and we just sat down and we were talking, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds like he'd be a great fit for what we do and how we approach the community, and so here we are.
We're trying to recruit Brian to become high school football officials. Goes both ways.
Just another thing on the plate.
That's right, yeah. But no, I appreciate it very much. So.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. I think Barb's going to have a picture.
You don't have to hold hands or anything.
Oh, okay.
All right, thanks. And then you're just in time to go to the football game.
That's
Yes,
right.
perfect.